wetlands under the previous 3 delineations, and most of the infrastructure was installed based on that. Now, the EDA's business model is to sort of front the cost of that infrastructure and reimburse itself through land sales. So if they're not able to fully realize on that because of a reduction in developable land because of that 4th delineation, then that's going to create an undue financial burden on their ability to recover those things. So in conclusion, I'll just say that Chesterfield EDA has consistently gone above and beyond on this, that they've complied with every requirement of the law and everything that DEQ has asked of it. And so in its development of the Meadowville Technology Park, I believe has been exemplary. They've kept their delineations current. They haven't sought to impact wetlands on a speculative basis. They've designed the park to avoid or minimize impacts when it can, and now it's fully mitigating those impacts when it can avoid them. So we believe this permit and the conditions that we've agreed to in the permit is the latest example of that approach. Therefore, for those reasons, I would just respectfully request that the board issue the permit as recommended by the DEQ. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, just one quick. So you've met all federal and state criteria for mitigation, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And you accomplished that by going to by wetland credits.
A wetland credit.
Is that a private bank?
The Eastern Henrico Bank, yes, it's a private bank.
So you made comment 3 times, I count, in reference to the great expense that you've gone to. Are we supposed to take notice of the great expense to do what you need to do to meet the state and federal criteria?
I made the comment just to, well, for the obvious point that it's very expensive to do a 2-to-1 ratio. Some of the discussions about whether it's forested, isolated, or non-isolated, we've agreed that it's isolated, or that it's non-isolated, so that we're mitigating 2-to-1, where there could have been an argument that it should have been 1-to-1, things like that. We're agreeing to pay at the high end of what is required based on our interaction with DEQ.
Roberta?
Excuse me. Sorry. Is this from you? This drawing, or one of your staff, I guess?
This is, Timmons Group, who's the civil engineer.
Okay. And I was, trying to read the chart, but that's okay. What I was wondering, you said that there were 4 delineations for the entire office park?
Correct.
Those were done.
First one was in 1996, in 2002, 2008, and then the latest one in 2014.
And did you come up with changes in the wetlands through the course of 4 delineations? Did you find growing wetlands, shrinking wetlands? Did you, could you explain a little? I mean, there's oftentimes, ecology can be dynamic.
Sure.
And criteria have changed, with different Supreme Court decisions, etc. So could you give us an idea of the changes that you saw either on site itself or just by virtue of the changes of the regulations?
Sure. Let me introduce Chris Dodd, who's with Timmons Group that drew that map. I'll just say my understanding, the first 3 delineations were substantially identical. And the only change occurring with the 4th delineation was the change in having to use the Corps' new regional supplement.
So as Andy mentioned, the first 3 delineations were relatively consistent with one another, fairly well confined systems through the drainage ways, adjacent wetlands, 2 streams. There were some areas that were more terrace-driven, isolated and connected systems, when we performed the fourth delineation under the Corps' recent Atlantic and Gulf Coastal Plain Regional Supplement. The area identified in the center of that property, as well as some of the other areas that are on more of those terraces. We did find that the loblolly pine in Virginia was changed from a facultative status to or fact negative to facultative, and we got rid of the plus and minuses in Virginia as well. So that site being largely loblolly that was planted back after it was timbered was one criteria that drove a major change in vegetation. And secondly, low chroma soils in the top 2 inches, sort of the F criteria, was something else that was driving that new delineation being confirmed as an isolated area. That area, as we've mentioned, had been timbered, compacted, some of the existing material stripped. We met with the Corps several times about that matter and agreed that it's isolated under the current standards. We might not agree with how it changed, but the county agreed that it is currently a wetland, and therefore we need to go through the proper process to permit it.
I guess that in terms of total acreage of the, did you look at total acreage of the entire office park, right?
Yes, we delineated the entire 1,350 acres of Meadowville 4 times in 20 years.
Did you find between 2008 and 2014 that there were more wetlands?
60 acres of additional wetlands on the property. 8 acres was that additional acreage in the middle of this, and there are some other areas around the property. All the ones that were confined to drainage ways based on topography, none of them changed. Some of the other areas where anthropogenic activities, timbering, historical land use, where the soils have been altered through land use, that upper 2 inches, low chroma exists. That was not previously a criteria under the delineation manual, and a lot of the areas that have been timbered that were replanted in pine, that also changed the situation. But none of the areas that were confined to drainage ways did we notice any difference.
Luann, any question?
I do. I noticed that, now, stop me if I misheard or whatever that you said, but I've noted that you have donated 150 acres to VCU.
Yes, so the question that was asked earlier about being able to do a bank on site, the entire floodplain area in the north portion of the park, which you're looking at beyond the life sciences area, there's 150 acres of floodplain and wetlands that aren't even shown on there that, how many years ago, Gary? 5 years ago, was donated to VCU. That would have been a perfect area to do a mitigation bank, but given 2008 rule stating that mitigation banks were preferred alternative and no on-site mitigation was being done, we donated to VCU. That's part of their study program. You know, it's in the floodplain. There were nice wetland systems. That's not shown as any of the acreage that's part of the park now or accounted for and what's been avoided in that number that's been proposed, although there were wetlands in that area that have been given away.
So I was interested in you've done a great job of explaining that, and thank you very much, but I was interested in outdoor classroom activities. Are they doing anything there that would help this site for future use?
Hello, I'm Garrett Hart, Economic Development Director for Chesterfield and staff for the EDA. VCU has chosen to leave that area pristine, to use it as a test model against other areas that they are doing activities in and have classrooms, so it remains untouched.
I have another question. This site plan, you'd probably be the most familiar with the site there, but what is what's the vegetation around that isolated wetland? What you're calling isolated, but you know, looking at it, I could see where it might have a hydrologic connection to that stream, but what's the vegetation around that forested Palestine wetland?
It's predominantly a mix of pine, this is the predominant tree species. There are some maples and sweet gums and white oak, red oak, and hardwoods in the areas that haven't been timbered, which are usually adjacent to the stream corridors, which in our planning process, we have left buffers on the existing wetlands and streams. We actually have a timber plan that was approved for that lower portion of the park. The county has not moved forward with that. Everything has been flagged off with buffers in those areas. Some of the other areas of the park that have been, Amazon has been developed, Capital One, Medline, Northrop Grumman, all those areas, we have left the existing wetlands and streams with buffers on them so they can continue to mature. There are also resource protection areas through the Chesterfield Bay Preservation Act that have been identified on some of those systems. So we have 100-foot buffers on those areas.
One of the things I noticed in the staff package was that there was not going to be a state requirement for construction timing to avoid removing that 8 acres during songbird nesting season, during the breeding season. There was a comment, I think, from one of the agencies, and I wonder, does the local practice of the EDA, or are there local regulations that that dictate, that you understand you would have more of an impact on the wildlife if you deforest during breeding season than if you waited until winter time. So I wondered if are there local regulations on that would make that condition not necessary in the permit?
We coordinated with the Fish and Wildlife Service and DGIF through the process to make sure that there were no species of concern. We actually performed a habitat assessment throughout that project last year for bat species to make sure that there were no issues prior to Fish and Wildlife Service changing their time of year issues. We've actually done a survey out there to evaluate potential for any bats out there. We did not do anything as it related to birds or songbirds. Given the nature of that area, it's fairly, it's a successional growth area currently. And as it relates to, once we had that approval, from a construction standpoint, those soils out there being somewhat wet to deal with, doing construction in the wintertime, which is what we did on Amazon, becomes very, very difficult to get done, especially given the schedule.
This, the page 5 of the fact sheet says that DGIF also recommended a time of year restriction to protect nesting resident and migratory songbirds that are not listed as threatened or endangered. These resources are not within the purview of the VWP permit program, therefore the DEQ did not include the restriction. So my question was whether or not the local government, through its building permit process or the policy of the Office Park, was to actually implement that, and it sounds like the answer is no. Okay, thank you.
Cindy, do we have other questions?
Madam, we have 4 speakers, 4 citizens who commented during the comment period. We can address for up to 3 minutes versus Thomas Baccarat.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Thomas Baccarat, and I represent Hands Across the Lake. We're interested primarily in water quality and developing in a win-win scenario so that both business and the environment can flourish. Very simple. It's hard to do, especially when you have a speculative project like this, and you are well versed in the alternate design and avoidance, which is also of concern when you don't really know what you're trying to avoid, or you don't have a good plan to deal with keeping track of what you're protecting and what you're not. The concern, very simply, is that we got 10 acres almost of wetlands impact, which is huge. And we really haven't done, in a citizen's opinion, due diligence on avoiding. In the 25 years I've been dealing with water quality in Chesterfield County, the science has evolved and changed. And avoidance is so much better than mitigation, if at all possible. And I would suggest perhaps the way to move forward, there's an awful lot of questions, excellent questions around the due process of avoiding something that you don't know what you're avoiding, what you're doing, is to perhaps take a look at some of the design practices of neighboring states where light imprint technology has been used to successfully protect large industrial complexes. In fact, one was even used in Chesterfield County a few years ago by a hospital, St. Francis Hospital, to design a 100-acre impact light imprint technology. My suggestion to you all is to not rule on this particular case today. Come back in September at the regular meeting and deal in the meantime with getting the detailed answers to whether or not this project can better fit on this property and avoid as much of a wetlands impact as possible. 20% reduction would be huge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Glenn Bessel.
Hi there, I'm Glenn Bessel. I'm representing the Circle, but as a volunteer. Some of you may know I was previously the director, but I recently retired. However, I do live in Chesterfield County. I might also mention that Tom Pactuar lives in Chesterfield County too. So this is not just an issue of concern from the standpoint of me representing the Circle, but also as a resident of Chesterfield County. And I had actually written in my notes exactly what Ms. Kellum had noted too. Death by 1,000 cuts. This is death of the bay by 1,000 cuts. In this case, 10 acres, which is really huge. I mean, when you look at the entire list of wetlands losses in Chesterfield County over the last decade or so, none of them are this large. I think there was one that was around 5, one around 4, most of them less than an acre. This is a really big deal. It's not a routine matter at all. And so it's important that you answer the questions that have been posed in the comments too. And many of the comments that were addressed by staff were actually in response to questions I asked. I'm going to go over those because I think, I'm not sure I feel they've been addressed adequately. One, this is a 1,350 acre site. Surely you can find other areas on this industrial park that would not represent the loss of 10 acres. In fact, it's important to recognize that in the May 10th letter from Timmins, DEQ, doing its due diligence, simply asked that question, what have you done to find alternatives? Excuse me just a second here. And basically they respond to it in three brief paragraphs. So you ask, what have you been doing to avoid and minimize impacts? And this is in their May 10th letter, question number 5. And boom, you got 3 questions. Three short paragraphs is how they address it. They simply say, well, the developer wants to put it there, and we try to move it around a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, and they really fail to say, well, what about if you look somewhere else and have 1,350 acres? So they really didn't do the due diligence with respect to looking at alternatives. I also want to raise the question of cumulative impact, which was addressed, and I don't think adequately. In the original permit, this thing's been kicking around for over a year. For some reason or other, it was proposed last year, and then when there was a lot, I think 30 or 40 comments in opposition to it, it disappeared for a while. And I'm not sure why, but then it just came back. But there's reference to 3 phases of this project. Now that sort of disappeared in this discussion, but we asked the question, well, what is the 3rd phase, and what will its impact be on wetlands? Because we are concerned about the cumulative impact, and rather than the general discussion that was addressed in the comments and here earlier, this was described as 3 phases. What is the third phase, and what are the impacts of the third phase? I think that's a legitimate question to ask. And lastly, I'll just characterize, I looked at the various data sheets with regard to the site survey, and it wasn't clear that they were all loppoli pine. In fact, some of them didn't have loppoli pine on at all in that 10 acres. Some of them were mixed hardwoods, and so I think that the question with regard to the characterization of this 10 acres may be not accurate, and does again raise a serious question as to whether or not the mitigation proposal is adequate too with regard to basically emergent forest and wetlands that's only 6 years old. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Tyler Madison. There's nothing new in here, is there, Tyler?
Cindy, we,
It's just my comments today.
Okay.
It's just my comments today, just.
Which are a summary of what you've already, commented,
Yes.
correct? Okay, because there's no new information accepted today.
I don't think so,
Okay.
but I've been trying to do some research, so maybe, maybe there'll be something that, that'll be of interest. Okay, so, basically, I'll just jump down a little bit. One second. I'm sorry. Oops. Oh, Tyler Madison.
Tyler, 1 second, please.
We won't start your 3 minutes yet. I just want to be clear. It sounded like you were telling us that you had done additional research that was in this information, and our obligation is to make sure that your comments reflect comments that are in
Okay,
the
well, I
record.
was just rereading some of the information that was already there.
Okay. All right, thanks.
So, don't want anyone to worry about it. But anyhow, Tyler Madison, I do live in Chesterfield County. So I'll just jump to number 1 if you'd like to try to follow it in my 3 minutes. So the 2-to-1 mitigation plan is proposed. However, the mitigation would be at a site 15 miles north of the proposed project in eastern Enrico Mitigation Bank. This mitigation will not replace the present value of the wetlands. A functioning created wetland must be monitored. It cannot replace what nature intended. And then I'll just go into what wetlands do, which everybody knows. Okay. So, and then number 2 is in the Corps of Engineers report of 2015, they did mention 2 endangered species, the swamp pink, which is a wetland plant, and the northern long-eared bat, saying, based on this determination, further coordination with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is required. And just keep in mind that the U.S. Corps of Engineers, to my knowledge, has not filed an okay yet. So number 3, the Corps of Engineers requires compliance with the Coastal Zone Management Program under the Coastal Zone Management Act, just a fact. Also compliance with the Office of Environmental Impact Review needs to be submitted by the applicant for, excuse me, for consistency certification. And I'm just wondering if these requirements have been addressed. And you don't have to answer me now, but and the Corps of Engineers, as I said, hasn't yet issued a permit. And then number 4, a list of wetland losses in Chesterfield County over a 10-year period from 2005 to 2014 shows no loss as large as 10 acres. Most are a fraction of an acre, like 0.04 or 0.05, and the largest was 5.91 acres that was issued on August 20th in 2007. And then number 5, the Timmons engineering firm who did the wetland delineation study for the applicant stated that most of the wetlands are the result of past logging operations which compacted the soil, yet the statement is not backed up by their own site surveys included in the permit. Therefore, they are truly truly isolated wetlands. When alternatives were asked for by the DEQ, Timmons should have researched other sites for the project in the Meadowville Technology Park rather than reconfigure the building plan on the same wetland site. And lastly, It is not a justifiable reason to assume a building must be built, of course, in my opinion. The premise that a warehouse is, quote, needed does not seem to be a decision for the Department of Environmental Quality. During the comment period, it was suggested that a relocation of the project or an adjustment of the site plans be considered. And my last sentence, the DEQ's response was, quote, "The parcel selected is the only site that meets the project purpose and is sufficiently sized to accommodate the size of the warehouse needed." So I respectfully ask that you either deny the permit or postpone the permit until other sites are proposed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Herb Walk.
Good morning. Thank you all for what you do. I'm a resident of Chesterfield County. I got transferred up here in 1967, and I want to associate myself with the prior three sets of remarks. Let me give you a little bit of my background, just quickly. Back in the early 60s, I grew up in Tidewater. I worked on the Finners Point Marine Terminal as a kid in college, and also Rudy Inlet when we were trying to save Virginia Beach sand and all that sort of thing. So I know how these things go. And I'm, by the way, totally in favor of the park that they have, the industrial park. I've taken my engineering group, my society, through both Northrop Grumman and Amazon, great facilities. But I also spent a large part of my working career as a manager of planning. And I very much believe in having a master plan, or a plan that you stick to. And it sounds like we've had some, and we've evolved from them. And we need to have a very, very good reason for doing that. And I don't see, I came to learn more about this. I looked online, I did not see a site plan. I have looked at those many, many times in my past and in my working career. I didn't see it, I wanted to know more about it. And I think what I've learned is we don't have one. Not one that was available to the public. So I ask that you take some time, either defer this or deny it at this point, so that you have time to look at it further. Because I don't think you have been given enough information to make a good decision. And I appreciate all you do. Thank you very much.
That's all. We'll close the comment period, or the comment discussion. And I'll put it to the board. You all wish to discuss further? I wanted to say that Chairman Dunn was the hearing officer at the public hearing, and I did speak with him yesterday, and he wanted me to offer his thoughts to our fellow board members, and that he felt, based on what he had heard at the public comment period and what DEQ had done in response to that, as well as the Chesapeake Economic Development Authority, he felt like that the comments had been heard, they had been addressed, and that additional measures were taken both by the EDA and by staff to ensure that compensation was adequate, and that efforts had been taken to avoid and minimize the impacts to the greatest extent possible. So I offer those comments from Chairman Dunn, and my own comment is that I concur with him at this point.
May I? I've had conversations with Director Pagler in the past about my troubled, I guess, my concerns about voting on permits when we get a couple of weeks to review the information, and we get a chance to talk, to ask questions of staff, and we may or may not take that opportunity, but we do have the opportunity to get more information from staff if we feel we need it. And I did not feel that I had enough information from the offset in this permit application. And I decided, not that I was trying to, I guess, make an example of this or make some sort of posture, but I wanted to wait and see what the staff offered at our meeting today. And I just have to say that, you know, this is where the rubber meets the road on, you know, the rights of the landowner and the applicant to be fairly heard and have due process, and for us to adequately protect the public and the resources that we are charged with protecting. And I'm just very, very troubled by the lack of information about the mitigation that is being proposed, the impacts that we're being asked to approve of without even, you know, having a photograph or, you know, really, it doesn't tell, this is one picture that not even the entire State Water Control Board has received. We just asked for the applicant. It doesn't show the full, you know, situation on the site in terms of the resources that we're being asked to make a vote on, decision on. And yes, it does show that there are additional buildings on here that look like they are proposed additional phases that will have additional impacts. So my hope is that others on the State Water Control Board will agree with me that what we ought to do is defer this until our next meeting, get site plans, get habitat information, the wetland information, get information about the mitigation plan, just in actually understanding now that you need a site plan according to Director Paler in order to satisfy the Army Corps of Engineers. And I'm looking here, seeing additional buildings with additional impacts, and it appears that we have, you know, more, we have more impacts coming. So what, is this something that needs to be looked at as a complete, is this not a complete application, I guess, when there are additional impacts? So that is my hope that others will, on this board, will agree with me that we ought to get more information from the staff and make that information publicly available. This, you know, wasn't anything available online other than what we've been given, so others are in the same position. And that's all I have to say.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to leave anybody with the impression